So, I mean, it's such an honor to be discussing with all of you.
It's an honor for you to join us and sacrificing your Sunday. We really appreciate it. And we want to, get the ball rolling because, we said we'll do this, and it's just great for you to join us. We appreciate it.
No, thank you as well. Thank you so much for inviting me as well. So when will all of the other members join? 11 or in 3 minutes?
Okay, there's Vusi coming in.
Hello, Mr. Vusi. Nice to see you again.
Hi, Isaac. How are you?
Are there some problems with your camera?
I'm busy switching it on. Just give me a sec.
Oh, no problem.
Who else is here? Hi, Sushi.
And there's also Mr. Mlambo.
Oh, Mr. Mlambo, how are you, sir?
Hey, Pussy, I'm okay. Yourself?
Wait, let me just get my camera going.
Hi, Vusi.
Hi, Sushi.
Long time, eh?
Yes.
We're so near, but so far.
Yeah, it's because of all this work that we're doing.
That's very true. I know that all of you have been doing a lot of hard work over the past few months ever since I left South Africa. On Ukani Education Center, Kumeni Education Center, and you've also done work on the Da Vinci Institute. And I know that all of you have done so much work and laborious things to make sure that the school system is better, just in these local 2 schools, which is, but there are so many more schools than that worldwide. So just fixing those 2 schools will probably do something for what? Maybe the 1,000, 2,000 people who go there combined in total. But I want to change the entire world because so many people, not just in South Africa, but in the United States where I live, or in any other country around the world, have not good education. Their education is lackluster, and they don't get, their education is usually filled with tests. They always overstress, and the school does not care to deal with any other outside things that could cause even more stress, like, for example, bullying. So I believe that we need to change that. This cycle of stress will only lead to even worse performances in school, and thinking that good grades are the best, otherwise mom will slap you. It's the worst mindset anybody can have. It's trial and error. You don't just get to try everything once in your life. So that's just my little talk about education. I will share more when the meeting actually starts between a lot more of you, I would believe. It looks like it's 11 o'clock right now, so should it be starting?
Yes, thank you very much, Soborno, and thank you, colleagues, for joining this meeting and sacrificing your Sunday. Good afternoon to South African colleagues and good morning to Soborno. So this meeting is one of many, and I think from our side, from TT100, this will be a brainstorming meeting introducing what we will do going forward. And as I mentioned with Soborno earlier, that we're going to ask the ED, Vusi, and Mr. Malambo to nominate at least 2 students from your school that Soborno will work with. So, the technology hub is set up at Kumeni and Vusi because we thought it will be much easier from the kids understanding with Soborno, and, we come in where necessary. So Prinzal, hi, Prinzal. Thanks for joining.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, Doc.
Hi, Doc.
So I don't know where we're going to start. So let's just see how's it going to go. Busi, were you in that meeting with Tirani and Ben and Javier regarding how we can work with Soborno related to the maths development?
Yes, I was in the meeting, although it's still open-ended, you know, there isn't a particular scope that I can recall. So I don't know if that would be a good place to start in terms of just putting together a sense of what we're trying to achieve and what the scope will be. And I know a person like Ben would perhaps think differently and just say, no, we don't have to have a scope per se. Let's just see where it takes us. So I'm not sure how you want to deal with it, Sushi.
Frinzal, your thoughts, and then we can see with Mr. Malambo and Soborno.
Thank you, Sushi. I think from my side, what I would really like some clarity on maybe is maybe what we can look at is in terms of what it is that we want to achieve. So is it going to be something in general? Is it going to be for a specific grade, for a specific standard? Is it going to be something introductory to get people hooked on maths and show them that it can be fun and how much fun it can be? So I also think that I agree with Lucy. I think we need to maybe get a little bit of structure, and out of that we can also see where it leads us. But I also think that we need to be led by Prof. Isaac or Prof. Soborno, so he can also tell us what his ideas and thoughts are, because we would really like to explore his mind and where he thinks this should take us.
Thank you. So, should I present my ideas now or when the conversation really starts?
I think you can present your ideas now.
I like that idea. I would love for you to just share your ideas with us. So absolutely, you can start presenting to us.
So I have probably said this one or two times before, but there are two mainstream ways that people want to learn. One is the Piaget system of learning. Piaget's theory basically says that there are 4 stages of development. From 0 to 2, you don't really have the concept of object permanence. You're still learning how to walk or how to talk, and you want to use all of your skills in your everyday life, but you don't really know how to do things intentionally. Then from 2 to when you grow up to something like 4, you start to become more curious. You want to apply your skills into everyday life, and now you're starting to have the concept of object permanence. So if your mom takes a pencil, for example, and then hides it, you will know that the pencil is still there, even though you cannot see that pencil. So people or children are said to start becoming more curious when they reach that age. However, there is also the third stage from 4 to 11, where and there is also the third stage from 4 to 11, where people start becoming more operative. They learn how to start to do stuff intentionally. They start using their skills even more in everyday life. They start having like cognitive connections and much more than that. So when people are from 4 to 11, they develop even more. And then it is said that from 12 and onward, your mental state is fully developed and you will stay the same throughout, as if you will. So that's already the first inaccuracy. I'm sure that there were a lot of people whose mental state was not the same back when they were preteen or like 12. And secondly, it assumes that every single child will follow these stages of learning in exactly the ages as those learning stages list. So they're saying that if a child is 9 years old, they're going to be in the third stage of development. If a child is 2 years old, they won't know how to speak, even though there are a lot of exceptions to that. Now, our school system is heavily based on that, especially this whole grade system thing. This grade system is eventually the stages, but broken up into simpler parts. They're saying that if you're 9, you should know a fourth grade level of, you should have fourth grade level education. That if you're 15, you should know as much as, say, a ninth grader. However, that's not always the case. Maybe a child has been nurtured very well and they know more than others at their age. Or a child is in very bad conditions. They don't have anything around them to learn with. If they're in very bad conditions, they may even have less knowledge than their age should require. Than their age would typically have according to the school system. So some people are offset in the school system. And sure, there is the system of skipping grades or holding back grades, but that is really, really, really rare. I mean, I had the privilege of sort of skipping grades, but others in the school systems all around the world aren't so lucky. So that's why I think we should be changing the education system, because people who are 9 are usually classified as, oh, you should have a fourth grade level of education. And so if there was a 9-year-old coming into the fourth grade classroom with more knowledge than grade level, there will be nothing to prepare them. There will be nothing to increase their knowledge. The fourth grade will just be a barrier for them that seemingly blocks them and bores them all year long. And so that is why I think we should fit the school to the child's need, not fit the child to the school's need. Now, there's also the Vygotsky system, which isn't perfect, but it is surely better than the Piaget's educational system. It basically says that there are 4 skills that one has at birth. There is sensory, like for example our 5 senses, memory. There is perception, and our last one. And all of these 4 are developed more and more as we use them in our social environment and as we find applications of them in our day-to-day life. And as that happens, we can grow even more. So, for example, if somebody is nurtured well, if they had learned to use math in their everyday environment, if they can learn to see math everywhere, then they will probably use math more. And as a result, they will be more efficient and more fluent in math. Well, at least according to this theory of learning. So what they're basically saying is we have 4 senses at birth, and we can sort of level them up as we use them more and more. Kind of like in games, you level up when, I don't know, you kill enemies. Haven't played many video games. So, and that is, I think that Vygotsky's theory is much better than Piaget because it fits to the needs of special children, people who are either above grade level or maybe even below grade level. And it fits to the needs of both of those people because otherwise many school systems will just not know what to do with them. And so those children won't be nurtured. And eventually, in the 4th grade, or maybe any other grade they're in, which they're above grade level, that's going to bore them out of their mind, and they won't have anything for them to learn more because the things they're being taught are things that they already know. So that's my little speech on the two learning systems. And I think that Vygotsky's is certainly better than Piaget's because it caters to the needs of all children, not just children who follow the grade level.
Thank you, Prof.
No problem.
That was incredibly insightful, and you know, one of the things that I did is I took my children. You met them. You spent the day with them in Soweto, and they're homeschooled particularly because I suppose we share a similar view in the sense that the education system just doesn't work. But I'd like to bring up another conversation about, and perhaps we're having a conversation about a conversation, but perhaps we should take one step back and tackle the question of the purpose of education. And perhaps let me contextualize it a little bit. I have an uncle, he passed away recently last year. But he grew up in the rural side of South Africa, and he never really went through formal education. But he was an extremely wise person, you know. So he obviously learned about how the world works, and got to really understand human nature, and about caring for people. And you know, whenever I had some challenges in life, I went to him for some guidance about, you know, how to deal with some pretty important things, I think. And so I'd like to believe, therefore, that there's a different category of knowledge, and perhaps I will loosely call it wisdom, which I think is hardly ever taught in school. And when we go to school, I think we tend to want to develop people's capacity to develop instruments and to sort of work with the things of the world, if I might put it that way. And we hardly ever deal with the other aspect of knowledge, which is more along the lines of wisdom and understanding how things generally work, especially as it entails to well-being and people and empathy and things like that, which I know you also think about quite a lot. And so, having said that, I'm wondering how we can, or whether we should even bring that into the conversation. The idea of less teleological knowledge, you know, or more. I just I can't find the words to put it, but less instrumental knowledge. But that's my contribution for now. And thanks once again for the generous introduction about the different theories of knowledge.
No problem. So I understand where you're coming from. There are, and I know that there are like very important parts of education. Like for example, learning how nature works, learning how everything works, and being genuinely intuitive, creative, using that knowledge to make even more. And you have to also learn to use all of your skills. So those two commonly mingle or intertwine. And I like how you gave us an introduction to those two. So I also send my condolences to your uncle.
Thank you.
So is there anybody else who wants to speak?
I'm just typing something there. When Lucy was speaking, I was thinking of a saying where the saying goes, never mistake knowledge for wisdom. One helps you make a living, the other helps you make a life. So I think that's a very important distinction between knowledge and wisdom. And I think at the end of the day, what we want is to develop good human beings, people who care about other people and who, I think that's not something that we must ever lose sight of, is the fact that we want to create humane societies, because at the moment, I don't think society feels incredibly humane. And what I also like about what you're saying in your approach in terms of let's not put something in a box necessarily, but let's get people to be curious and let them explore and do their own thing as well. And maybe something beautiful can come from that. So I think from my side, I always want to go to the how and the what, so what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? And I think those are important questions to answer. But I think that the why we are doing this is probably the most important question that we need to answer.
Why are we doing this? That's a great question. Mr. Nambo, do you want to speak?
Prof, can I just follow for now? I'm just following the discussion. I'm interested on the how part of it. I think I've captured the why part. Maybe I'll make a contribution on the how part of it.
Do you want to speak?
Not for now, Prof.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you. So, I feel like Dr. Franze sorry if I pronounced that wrong, brings up a great point about knowledge and wisdom, which are very connecting things, but they are still two different things. I would say knowledge is what we know, and maybe wisdom is the prediction of knowledge we have yet to obtain. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe in your eyes you have a different opinion, but that's just my view of things. So if anybody has a different view of knowledge and wisdom, then feel free to share.
I think there's a nice example where they always say we have the knowledge to build an atomic bomb, but is it wise to use it? And I think that sums up the difference between knowledge and wisdom very well, because I think wisdom is just knowing when we should and shouldn't apply knowledge and what kind of knowledge we should be applying.
That's probably a better idea than mine, to be honest. We should have the wisdom. So we have the wisdom to, build an atomic bomb, but should we use it? That's actually a great analogy of it. Maybe I could change sort of my hypothesis based on that. So I would say that wisdom now is maybe probably, how can I describe this? It's wisely using what we know to create a better future. So it is using the stuff we know, our knowledge, to create a better future. So we should have the wisdom to not drop atomic bombs everywhere, because we don't want nuclear fallout happening around the world. And so that will certainly not make a better world. So we have to have the wisdom. We have to have the wiseness to know how to use our knowledge to create a better world. We have to use that to make sure we don't drop those atomic bombs everywhere. It's a great analogy, but probably I've gone on for so long that you forgot what I meant in the first place.
Can I contribute something else as well? I'm trying to slowly get us from the why question and sort of try to connect it to the scope of what we're trying to achieve. And otherwise we'll just remain philosophers and just ideate and just talk, which is not necessarily a bad thing, because I think very few people take time to think seriously about things. But nevertheless, I just happen to be interested in a lot of things, right? For instance, right now I'm studying music. I'm doing a bit of music theory, and I'm sort of torn between jazz and classical music. And I'm really into music. I'm also really into philosophy, and I expressed some of the things that I think about in essays and podcasts and things. And I'm really into business, which is something totally different as well. So what I'm learning is that some of these things are I'll loosely call it different categories of knowledge, because the way you acquire the knowledge in the arts, for instance, is completely different to the way you acquire knowledge in, say, business, right? For instance, I could tell you about scales and music theory and so on, but there's no way you can really learn them unless you practice them. So you have to put in the hours in order to acquire musical knowledge.
Exactly.
On the other hand, we can talk about Piaget, and I could understand his theory without having to practice it. So the way I acquire that knowledge is very different. Hence, I say that for me, at least, there are different categories of knowledge. And I haven't read the literature on knowledge in order to maybe express myself properly. But this is just from my own experience at this stage. And so I'm wondering whether in what we are trying to achieve here, it might be that we can look at these, look at maths and science, which have, which I think to some extent is a combination of both, in the sense that there is some theoretical knowledge, I would say, you could acquire about maths and science, and therefore understand certain things. But as you practice it, you learn to connect disparate dots in order to create a new reality. So the maths and science for me is interesting because it's a combination of these categories of knowledge that I'm sort of loosely alluding to. And I'm wondering whether if there's whatever program we create could then try to talk to those two distinct methods of acquiring this knowledge, one which is practice and the other which is just acquiring it from a theoretical point of view, or just purely understanding it. Anyway, I'm not really trying to make sense. I'm just contributing for now so that we can start connecting some dots somewhere, but I'll leave it here for now.
Exactly the same, Mr. Rusi. I'm not exactly trying to make sense either, but I just want to contribute as well. And I mean, could all of these categories fall between? I mean, could all of these categories fall between? What am I saying? Could all of these topics fall between these two categories? You can just be talking to somebody and learn about them, or you can practice them, and that's the only way to learn them. Besides math and science, they're outliers. So would all topics fit into these two categories, or are there some ideas that are outside of those two categories? What would you say?
I would say there's more. Luckily, I've thought about this a little bit. Well, I've been spending the past 2 years thinking about this. So far, it really boils down to one's theory of human nature. And my take is that there are perhaps 5 dimensions I can think of, and all of them have their own knowledge systems about human nature. The first being this teleological world where we're trying to make things and sort of live day to day and whatever. The making of an atom bomb. I think that's one category of human nature where we're just trying to get by and survive and make things and go about what we do every day. A wholly different aspect of human nature is our aesthetic sense, which would go into the arts. Aesthetic means feeling, but musically, I think there's a whole way of understanding reality, which is through aesthetics, that you can never really describe in any other way, So that for me is the second aspect of human nature, which I think is really important. A third aspect would be somewhat I would say our sense of spirituality is a wholly different sense altogether. And that also, for instance, acquiring spiritual knowledge or developing it, I don't know how to put it, is a wholly different way, or a different, it's an entirely different category, I would say. Where I know I'm being a bit wishy-washy because I'm trying to put it into words, but also your sense of health, just physical health and staying healthy, is a totally different practice altogether as well. Unless you actually go out and exercise and feel a certain way and whatever, you just won't stay healthy. And unless you eat good food and so on. So that's an entirely different aspect of our nature as well. So so far I've given you 4, but all of those, for instance, for me, are areas of developing one's sense of self and knowledge. And you go about them differently. You can read as many books as you want about health, but unless you start eating a certain way, unless you start understanding how your body reacts to certain food and things like that, it never really makes sense. And similarly, you could read as many books as you want about music, but unless you start listening to music and you start playing the music and so on, but in the same way, I would say you could have as much faith as you want, but you won't necessarily get a properly formed scientific mind because it works in a certain way. You have to develop a hypothesis, be able to test it, and so on. So for me, there's different knowledge systems, and I'm still developing ideas around what they are and how they work in their different spaces, and how we could possibly pursue them. But that is what I'm still working on for now. And my take is these are I'm tempted to use the word innate, but they're there. Our appreciation of art and aesthetics and music is there, but it develops as you work on it. And our appreciation of problem solving in a very practical way, like if you move this there, it's there in everybody, but also it develops the more you work on it. So yeah, I don't know. That's my sense for now, Prof. I think there's more than 2 categories. I'm not clear ontologically on what they are. I'm still working on that.
Well, first of all, I never actually saw it that way. I mean, it's pretty obvious that however many books about health you read, if you don't actually follow their advice and practice their advice, you'll never be healthy. But but for music, I kind of never realized it was the same thing. If you watch piano tutorials and start playing them, even though you'll learn how to play that one song, you won't actually know how to play any sort of music. You'll only learn how to play the one song that it taught you. So, I mean, music. So that's a great way to see it, and it's also great to see and for the thing you said about just getting by, surviving from day to day. Is that really human nature, or is that animal nature, or is it that it's just nature itself? Every single organism on this planet is trying to get by and survive, except some humans, which don't want to really survive because they have a pretty stressful life. And a lot of animals want to get by and survive too, because it's just the nature of evolution. People who things that don't survive don't live on to the next day, and thus don't become the organisms that we see in the modern day. So, I mean, is that really just human nature, or is it the nature of all organisms? Now, I also wanted to talk about how you said math and science were like outliers, who were both in both of those 2 categories. So, math specifically is a very daunting task for many people who think of it as like a genius subject. That's probably the reason, you know, that I've gotten half of the praise I've received. So that's why I think we should fix this sentiment that mathematics is hard and only genius solve math.
Yes, I agree with you. You know, there's a jazz piece in particular called Giant Steps by John Coltrane. I don't know if you've heard about it. It was composed in was it the 60s or the early 70s? I can't really remember. And so that's one piece. It's called Giant Steps, so you could look it up. And it's considered the rite of passage for all jazz musicians because it's hard, and I'll put it in quotes. And the reason it's hard is because you have to understand the entire jazz music theory and practice in order to be able to play it, because it changes into different scales and different harmonies and different melodic lines, and it's a very complex piece. And so when people approach Giant Steps, you know, it's got a very similar aura to maths and science, where you say, oh no, you can't play Giant Steps. You have to wait until 20 years or something, and then you can sort of sneak gently into, even listening to it. For some people, they'll listen to like 30 seconds of Giant Steps and like, oh my God, no, this is such a complication. And when I started with music 20 years ago, and mind you, I stopped for about 15 years. So I started learning music when I was in high school, and then I had to get by like other animals, I guess, and I stopped. And then I started music again about 3 years ago. And I then decided, no, wait, let me try this Giant Steps, which everybody's so scared of. And indeed, it is difficult. It is challenging because you need to understand a lot of things. But in the process of actually just learning the little bit that I can learn and understand at that point in time, I can understand a hell of a lot more in other areas of music. You see, so it's like trying to get a piece of music which is highly concentrated and dense. In philosophy, it would be a bit like trying to read Immanuel Kant or Friedrich Nietzsche, which is highly densified content. But if you actually just work through it slowly and have a positive attitude towards saying, I'll approach it gently and slowly and just try to understand what I can, you find that you make so much more progress than being afraid of it, you know? And so I'm tempted to even say, with maths and science, perhaps let's give people the hard problems and let them then say, oh, this is a bit hard. Oh, okay, let me work my way backwards into the things that I want to understand in order to get there, rather than following Piaget's method of saying, no, let's start you with the dummy maths. What's 1 + 1? And then sort of gradually try to get people there. And so maybe I could summarize this in a question for both Doc Frenzel and Prof. Would it be worth our while to say to people, try the hard problem and then work your way backwards to trying to figure it out? Then, oh, here's some very easy problems and let's work your way to the harder ones.
That's actually a great thing that I never thought of before. Give people hard problems, because I mean, you brought up a great point with jazz and music. I think it was called Giant Steps, that book, or whatever.
Giant Steps.
Yeah. So thing is, a lot of people have perceived music or a lot of other subjects as hard. And in fact, a few months ago, I started getting into drawing or writing, and I mean, it was pretty hard. And I started getting the sentiment that Yeah, this is super hard to draw good. Maybe I shouldn't be doing this and I should probably only be focusing on math and science. But no, you have to persevere. And eventually, I got better and better at drawing. I'm still not Picasso. I'm still not even a very good artist. But I mean, I've gotten better from when I started. So it is great to push people out of their comfort zone, make them try things that are new. So and that's one of the most that is now one of the most important things to me. You just opened that whole concept up to me, Mr. Lucy, and I am so grateful for that. And I also and so I also think people should be able to use their knowledge from earlier. They should be able to use their knowledge from earlier, and just like you said, they should be able to use their creativity and wisdom to piece together the dots and use their earlier knowledge to solve harder problems like the ones you're giving them.
Yeah.
So I think I think Ben would definitely agree with you. He would say, give them the hard problems and, let them be curious, let them try, let them experiment, let them get to their own answers. And to some degree, I can see the appeal in that, and it is, but I also think humans are different. I think for some people, it is really about the challenge, and they love a good challenge, and they love anything that stretches their mind and that's going to challenge them to push themselves to get something done. But I think there's also other people who are, and I think sometimes maybe also because of the way kids were raised, that we basically break down, they're not confident. So they don't feel confident to try. And then when it's hard, they just assume that it's because I'm not clever enough or because I can't do this or and in some of those instances, so like I say, what I said to Ben one time as well is, would a child start walking if we didn't show a child how to walk? Would the child at some point just get up and walk, or do they need to see how other people walk? Do they need the encouragement of the people around them to support them to take those first steps and to get the confidence and to build that confidence so that they can get to a point where they are confident enough to then tackle those hard problems? And that's also something that I always struggle with in my own mind as well, is what part do you need to develop to get the person to become confident to take those giant steps? Or can you just start them off with giant steps and get them to work their way back to baby steps? And that is a question, and I'm not sure how I can't answer that question.
Okay, can I say something? My view is that the world is complex in its natural state, right?
Of course.
And so what we then do from an education point of view, we try to simplify it so that people can eventually get on to the complexity. So in other words, perhaps I'm repeating myself here. We'll say, okay, you want to play Rachmaninoff or Tchaikovsky or whatever. Let's start you with grade 1 music, and then you learn scales and you learn this and so on. And you gradually increase in complexity, and eventually you're able to play that super complicated music. And indeed, that seems to be the tradition in education, in school, in music, even in martial arts. I did capoeira at some point, and we'd practice. There's a basic move called the Jinga. We did that for almost 3 years, and then we started learning how to kick and how to do other things, and I would say that historically that would seem to be a consistent way of getting people to do complex work. It seems to be working from a, if we just look at the evidence. I'm just wondering, though, whether we lose the sense of creativity, because it's a good way to train people about something that you know. but I don't know if it's a good way to train people for something that is unknown. You know, I'm wondering, you know, at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, where a lot of knowledge was being created, you know, and a lot of creativity was required, and there were no simple steps in order to get to a complex place. People came up with hypotheses, they tried them out, and things didn't work, and they changed. And you know, anyway, I'm perhaps babbling here. Soborno, what do you think?
Well, first of all, I have a sort of conflicting view on the Industrial Revolution. In the Industrial Revolution, a few people were forced to be more creative. A few were, at the beginning, a few were had to think intuitively on how to be efficient with factories, like the bosses of factories, or maybe there were physicists or scientists at that time who wanted to think differently. But for the most part, everybody was a factory worker, and they were stuck doing the same thing, maybe packing boxes or building cars. So really, that's why our school system still has so many students packed in a classroom, teaching them all the same things. And you know, that's probably a leftover from when our education system was developed here in the U.S. back in 1837, around the Industrial Revolution. So many people needed to be factory workers, and in order to churn out more factory workers so that we could get more products, schools needed to get more people through the school system faster. And they had to do that by packing more people into a box. But anyway, I also wanted to talk about Dr. Franzel's analogy of an infant was learning to walk. So of course, a baby probably doesn't need to see how other people walk, or it doesn't need to be taught how to walk. Doesn't need to be taught how to walk by others. But if you put it in a room where it's completely alone with completely black walls and it cannot escape, it'll probably go insane within a few minutes, just like adults go insane within a few hours in solitary confinement. So that baby, we can't just lock it in a black room and watch it until it starts walking, because it never will start walking if it doesn't get any encouragement or any confidence. It will probably just fall over after 5 minutes. But I don't believe it necessarily takes that much teaching in order for a child to learn how to walk. It just takes confidence and trial and error. And trial and error, teaching them trial and error is one of the most important things. Because while trial and error isn't necessarily that important while walking, you have to use trial and error when you're doing a lot of other occupations in the world, especially in math and science. It's trial and error. You take a hypothesis, you will make a trial on it, and if it doesn't work, you start the process over again. That's the definition of the scientific method. So trial and error is one of the most important things, but school does not teach us that at all. In fact, it just gives us a bunch of tests, and it stigmatizes getting everything wrong. It stigmatizes getting low scores. And almost never can you ever try again on tests. And even when you make them, even if you make ordinary assignments up, they're usually only maybe half the credits. So I think that trial and error should be encouraged, and that we should also encourage our kids to try tackling hard problems, like for example, the problem of walking, without necessarily teaching them how to walk. And just like that, we should give encouragement to children, and we should give encouragement to children while giving them hard problems, even if we don't necessarily teach them how, and we don't need to necessarily teach them how to do that. We have to teach them to be curious and try to find a way around the problem. And a lot of people may give up at first and say, This problem is too hard. I want the solutions. And in fact, I had that sort of mindset when 2 or 3 years ago. But I have realized now that just giving up isn't going to teach me or teach others for when they want to become a physicist, a mathematician, an astronaut, a scientist, or basically anything in the math and science field. I don't know much about other fields, but I'm sure that there is trial and error in there too. And I'm sure that either Mr. Vusi or Dr. Franzel knows something about knows something about stuff other than math and science that I don't.
I doubt that very much so. But what I think you are saying and what I'm hearing is that what we want to achieve is actually a way of thinking. So it's not about teaching people recipes. It's about forming the mind in a way that it will encourage people to think in a particular way, to want to be curious, to want to experiment, to and for them to be okay with failing. I think that's part of what you're saying as well, as we live in a society where it's not okay to fail. And we need to get okay with failing, because it's through failure that we actually make progress and how we learn. Absolutely. I mean, nobody gets up and walk, like you were saying. They fall down and they have to get up, and we encourage them to get up again. And then we don't say, oh, this baby is a failure, we must give it back or get rid of it or give it up for adoption because it's obviously bad at walking. So yeah, absolutely. And I mean, somehow, somewhere along the line, we lose that. Somewhere along the line, it becomes a bad thing to fail at stuff. And I think that's also something that we need to maybe look at and talk about, in terms of it's okay to fail. That's how we learn. That's how we just, as long as you get up and continue, as long as you don't give up, we're all good.
Yeah. And I think you've nailed it, Doc. You know, the way I never went to school after high school, by the way. In part because when I was in high school, my dad was quite entrepreneurial, so he ran a lot of businesses. So when I got into high school, we started having problems at home. And I was constantly pulled out of class because we never paid school fees. And so when I was in grade 11 and 12, Soborno, those are the last 2 grades for high school. I spent quite a bit of time outside the class. So it just happens that I was really becoming good at music. So I would go to school so that I could go to music lessons. And I didn't have a piano at home, so I would go to school so I could practice the piano. So on average, I actually spent a lot more time on the piano than the average kid. And that's why I won a lot of awards and things. But then after that, there was a guy very close to where I stayed who was a software developer. And I went to his house and he taught me how to develop software. So while I was in high school, I was a musician on one hand and a software developer on the other hand. And I just did what I could with schooling just to finish. And by the time I got to matric, I was evidently disillusioned by the education system, because I thought to myself, they let me down. Why did they pick me up in the middle of class? And I was embarrassed most of the time. But anyway, when my dad said, hey, what do you want to do? You're done with matric. And I did reasonably okay. In fact, I did well, under the circumstances. So when my dad said, hey, what do you want to do? I said, I don't want to go to a formal education institution, because I think they care about things other than what they should be caring about. For me, it's about learning. So in the time, I did my high schooling pretty much on my own with the help of friends. And I learned that instinct for learning then, that I can actually learn things independently. The software, I learned it pretty much on my own as well, because, I had to learn. And the thing is, I was building software for other people and they'd pay me. And whenever the software stops working, I have to go and do research to fix it. And so that became my teacher. The fact that if my software is not working, people fight with me, you know. So that's how I went through high school. And I've never felt like going back to school. And to this day, I don't feel like it, even though I'm constantly studying. You know, I'm constantly studying because I think well, now I think my views about education have matured a bit. I just love the process of learning. But back then, it's just purely to survive. If I've been kicked out of homes 3-4 times, I've been homeless, you name it. And every time that happened, for me, it was, what do I not know? That was the question. What do I need to go and learn? You know? And if I had to move back to my mom's house with my wife and all of that, I'd sit down and say, let's think back. What did we get wrong? You know? And I'd go and study and change my behavior and just try what I can. And that's my relationship with knowledge and education. So to some extent, there is that surviving. That's what I was talking about earlier, learning in order to survive. But I've also developed a deep appreciation for learning in order to just play, you know, like music has nothing to do with survival, for me at least. It's a different aspect of human nature, which I just appreciate, you know. Spirituality is a separate thing. Hence, anyway, I'm repeating myself, but I think you've nailed it, Doc, when you said it's a mindset that we need to change. And unfortunately, there are so many institutions that are built around the wrong mindset. I run a school, so there's the 100% pass mark that everybody faffs over. If you fail matric, some kids commit suicide. If you're not doing well academically, you sometimes put into like a certain group of classes, you know, the dumb kids. So there's a lot of institutional reinforcement around this idea of being right. And I think if we want to then encourage people to be wrong, which is the scientific method, you know, scientists celebrate when they're wrong because they've discovered something new. It's an opportunity to contribute knowledge. You know, we have to think about it critically. So maybe it's not even about the maths and science. It's about cultivating a certain mindset where we create a space where people are allowed to be wrong and people are celebrated for being wrong, you know, because that's when they actually contribute something. So thank you, Doc, for that contribution. I think you've nailed it there.
So I also have something to say about Dr. Franzel's contribution. So that was all. First of all, so great. And second of all, I mean, first of all, this is probably me repeating myself. We throw a baby in the middle of the road and it gets run over. Then are we? Do we say should have put him in the orphanage earlier? So do we say that? No. We instead, when we teach our babies to walk, when they fail, we don't say go to the orphanage, you little prick. Instead, we say try that again. So trial and error is first encouraged as we are in our early stages, but over time, as we start to grow up extremely fast, there's this stigmatization of trial and error that happens. So when we're walking as infants, we may fail, and our parents say that's okay. But as you grow older, you're expected to be perfect and not have any wrongs. But that's exactly the opposite of what you should be doing. You should try and have trial and error. And in fact, scientists celebrate when they're wrong because that's led them to a new conclusion that what they were researching on was a dead end and that they have to try another route. So And also, the equivalent of the dumb kids class here in the United States is summer school or Saturday school, which makes it not only harder for the kid to even relax on the days like Saturday or the weekend or summer, which is the vacation. It makes it even harder for people to relax and for people to become better at learning. In summer school and weekend school, they have exactly the same standards as regular school. It's just that they push schooling on you more often, bad schooling on you, as if that's going to make anything better. So, I mean, that's not the point of learning. The point of learning is trial and error. But it seems like a lot of schools are disregarding that for perfection in test grades.
So perhaps that's our why, Doc. Perhaps we've finally articulated why we are doing what we're doing, which is to change the mindset from towards something which is similar to the scientific method, where people are just encouraged to play and to get things wrong and to try again and again and again. And then the question of how then becomes very interesting, because that then defines our scope, doesn't it? I run a school, Mr. Mlambo runs a school, and we could certainly try some things with our community where we encourage them to. I'm already trying to do that, but then, hence I'm saying there are all these institutions which work against us, and they've been built over many, many years where, we just have to create people that are right all the time, so it's interesting though. We have, and that's why I pulled my kids out of school, because now they don't have to worry about being right. They don't write exams. They don't do any of that stuff. And yet, the other one, the older one, the oldest one is doing film production now. The other one is a ballerina. She just took part in the qualifiers for the World Cups in Spain. And that's just what she does. Of course, there's the regular schooling that happens, but we don't have those problems. We just play with knowledge. And I'm wondering, how can we move some of that into our schooling, that mindset? And now we are in the how, I think. And maybe it's the parents that we need to attend to as much as the learners.
I fully agree with you. There's two more things that you touched on as well that I want to just briefly mention too. One of the things that, especially since I've joined Da Vinci, that has been something that I've been thinking about a lot, is around ontology, the nature of reality, and and that reality is far more complex than most of us think it is.
Yeah.
So when it comes to things like you were saying, like maths and science, is it part of the known and the knowable reality, or does it actually become part of the unknowable reality or the unknown reality? So where does it sit? And also this whole, because I think often what schools do is they teach us what we already know and what is already knowable, but they don't teach children to go into that chaotic domain and into that where the creativity sits, where like music, it's not something that we can really explain. It's a very difficult thing to explain to people how it works. So we can teach somebody how to play music, but we can't really explain why music does to us what it does to us. And how it's and that's, for me, actually it's a form of escapism as well. So you escape the real, and you can sort of just, like I say, it's just a form of escapism as well. And yeah, so maybe from that perspective as well, for me, this whole notion of reality is just one thing, which it is not. And we keep on trying to teach children that reality is only one thing. It's only about the known reality, cause effect relationships, testing hypotheses, while not everything can be measured, not everything can be tested through on hypothesis. So, so also that kind of thing. So that was something that went through my mind. And then the other thing that goes through my mind often, and I mean, that was my struggle with the school system, was that you are forced to learn things that you don't necessarily want to learn.
Yeah.
So everybody, as you were saying as well, I say everyone must follow the same curriculum. Everyone must learn at the same pace. Everyone must learn the same things, and everyone is then measured at the same way. And then the regulators come in, and the regulators say, well, what is your pass rate? What is your success rate? What is your throughput rate? Without that acknowledgement that people learn at different paces as well. And I mean, some of the learning theory also shows us that some kids fall behind. But if you give them enough encouragement, enough space to catch up, then they actually catch up with everybody else, and they're in exactly the same path as everybody else. It may just take them a little bit longer to get there. But then we go back, as you were saying as well, Prof, then we go back to labeling people as not being competent or actually being stupid, which is just horrible. But it may either not be an interest for them, or it may actually, they may just be slower. They just need something else to encourage them.
Yeah.
And then the last story that I want to make is I've met this guy who's got 4 kids, and they are all brilliant. So this sounds a little bit like your kids. And they are brilliant in a lot of things. So they are brilliant in schoolwork, all their schoolwork, basically all their school, but they're also very good at music, and they're also very good at sport. And I said to him, wow, that's incredible. You have 4 children and all 4 of them are good at freaking everything. How did you manage to do that? And he said to me, no, they're very average children. And I was like, no, you obviously don't know what average is, because these kids do not sound average to me at all. And then he just said, no, it's just, again, it's just, he said he thinks it's just the way that they raise their children. So they never praise their kids they never tell their kids, for example, wow, you've done well in a test. They will say something like, wow, you've worked hard to accomplish that particular mark, and well done for not giving up. And as a family, they would sit together. So if one of them is struggling with something, with a subject, as a family, they will get together and they will say, okay, well, let's figure this out together. Let's go search the internet. So let's go see if there's another way of doing this. Let's go see if there's another explanation for this that will make sense to you. Because the way one person explains something could make sense and can resonate with one person, but it doesn't resonate with the next person. But a different kind of explanation may resonate with them as opposed to the other person. So it's just an interesting, but it's also very much about, and I'm sure you've learned about that mindset, know about the whole thing around mindset as well, that the mindset is very important, because that's actually what makes people learn and go forward. Because if we believe that we are inherently intelligent or not, then we basically block ourselves from moving forward. So whereas if it's just a challenge that needs to be solved, it's just a problem that needs to be solved, and I just need to find the solution in a different way, it's a very different way of approaching learning.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's a great way of seeing things. Now, I wanted to go back to that point I mentioned about how we think that people, because they can't catch up with the curriculum, because they learn at slow paces, yeah, and because they learn at a different pace than everybody else, we categorize them as stupid. We make them have to go to extra schooling, as if that will make it better for them. That just makes it harder for them to catch up. And so one day, I actually wanted to try a hand at this new vocabulary game I found, where you basically had to type in a word with the letters it gave you on a timer, and there was an online chat feature in the game. Now, I don't dip my toes into that kind of stuff, but of course I watch people having conversations together, because who doesn't? And there was this one really sad moment when I saw there was this one person who felt suicidal, because and I won't leak any details about them here because privacy, but I mean, they were suicidal because they couldn't have a very good school life balance, and they also they were hit hard by one of their best friends leaving them. So a lot there were no in a lot of schools there were no types of school counselors or people who can help you get back on track. And a lot of and in this particular instance, that didn't happen, but in a lot of instances, this can lead to an untimely suicide, which is extremely sad and mortifying because we've lost so much potential in the world. So, categorizing people as stupid because they can't catch up with the curriculum in our schools in general are really just being sort of inhospitable to people who learn at different paces. And a kind of the opposite thing is happening with people who learn at faster paces. People who learn at faster paces are categorized as geniuses. Even they're categorized as geniuses, and when they know specific subjects like math or science, for example, they are categorized as big brain people who need special classes and stuff like that. Even though math and science is not a subject for just the geniuses, it's a subject that every single person should learn because it's one of the most important things ever.
I agree with you, but I think another danger is also that very intelligent kids may also become bored at school because they are expected. So you're sort of trying to find a balance between the ones that's learning slow and the ones that's learning really fast. So you're actually losing the ones that's learning slow, and you're also losing the ones that learns really fast because they also get bored. But they are required to stay in the same grade as everybody else because that's just how the curriculum is designed.
You know, something comes to mind here. There's this new, they call it what, the Big Five personality test. I think it's one of the more recent ones. I forgot the guys who developed it. I'll find it now and I'll put a link in the chat. But they test you on agreeableness. One of them is intelligence, and that's what I wanted to deal with, because they define intelligence in a very particular way. They say, roughly speaking, that intelligence is your capacity to see ideas and play with them clearly, right? And ideas are abstract things rather than physical things. And so they don't talk about intelligence in the way we commonly refer to it as, say, you're smarter than me, or they're not talking about it in terms of smarts. They're talking about it in terms of your capacity to hold abstract things in your head and play with them, right? And I thought that's pretty interesting because what I found as well is that intelligent people, in that sense of being able to be very abstract and play with things, tend to be, I guess you could commonly say, live in their own world, you would say, because when they become bored, like you're saying, Doc, it's not that they are really bored, it's just that they become engaged in something else because a lot of stuff goes on in their minds, and the danger with that, when we look at the theory of reflexivity, I think Karl Popper, who started playing with the theory of reflexivity. Anyway, when there's a lot of stuff going on in the mind and there's no feedback mechanism, you can tend to really go out and lose touch with reality. And so anyway, I thought I should just throw that in. I don't know, for whatever reason, it might connect somewhere around intelligence, because I think often we confuse smart and intelligent, and I think those are different things. Yeah, there's Christopher Langan, for example, who is extremely intelligent, but I don't think he's applied that intelligence very productively. At least I don't think.
You often get it with the savants as well. So they are very good ones. They can't be classified as being intelligent because that's the only thing that they can do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so what do we do then? I think we're sort of working around the idea of mindset and getting people to think differently. What do we say about that? Do we organize another session to deal with the how and maybe think about it some more? Or do you have an idea of where we can start a program of some sort, a workshop? I don't know.
In my opinion, we probably start some sort of new session because I feel like we still haven't, even though we have already articulated why we're doing what we're doing, we haven't really discussed how we can fix topics, and especially we haven't, even though we've gotten into the basics of math development, we haven't dove in deeper into stuff like math development. So even though we've already gotten into the basics of math development, when I gave that little speech at the beginning about, Piaget and Vygotsky, even though we got into that, we didn't really dive deeper into how people see math. And I also detailed a little bit on how people see math as the geniuses subject. It's just a subject for all of the people who are big brain people who. But math should not be discouraged from people who are math should not be discouraged from people who are on grade level. In fact, math should not be discouraged to people who are below grade level. Math is one of the most important things for every single person. Math is an extremely important thing because it's the thing we use in physics, which is using math to describe the entire world around us. There's no other language better than math to describe what is happening around us. So just ignoring or outright depleting or deteriorating math and slandering it is nothing more than just preventing your students from learning more about the world, which is exactly the opposite of what schools should strive to do.
Yeah, I think at some point I found myself in an online lecture on the philosophy of mathematics, where they were trying to define what maths is, or they were debating what maths is. And it's such a complicated subject, not in, well, it's a difficult subject because maths, in some sense, you can say it's a language, just like what Soborno is saying, where each of the symbols and there's some syntax you can put together in order to describe something. So you can use maths. It's a very high precision language, let's say, and then in another sense, when you then get into things like epistemology, it's so strange how theoretical maths can describe something which you haven't seen. For instance, what is it called? Is it astronomy or cosmology? I don't know. They were able to describe and predict the movement of planets and all of that in a purely theoretical sense way before it was done physically. And then when it was done physically, they were just following the math. So in some sense, you could discover reality through mathematics and find that the physical reality actually matches that. So then you've got epistemological problems, because how do you know that you know? Is mathematical knowledge true knowledge? Anyway, it was so fascinating for me to get into some of those things. And I would have appreciated for somebody to at least share that with me, instead of saying maths is this formula or that or whatever, to say, actually, no, maths is a language in the same way that music, these little symbols that we look at, is a language. And it is used to communicate a certain spectrum of our reality. You know, I don't know to what extent you could mathematically express love, but I know that you can do that musically. You know,
On a scale from 1 to 10, how much do you love me?
you know, well,
Well, that's
you know,
one way to describe it mathematically. So, I have some comments on that as well. So, again, what if math was like a hidden treasure, and we've already dug up some of it? And this treasure is not like gold or booty or something. It's actually kind of like a code that we're digging out, and that code is something that we can use to describe the world around us. And using that, and so that's kind of like physics. That code is like physics. And using math, which is the language that the code is written in, we can predict what is coming next in the sequence of code. So we can predict using math, and we can describe using math. Math is really something that's kind of intangible, or it's something that I feel that I cannot describe directly, and I'm sure that many of you share the sentiment, not just in this meeting, but around the world. Many of you share the sentiment that math is kind of like something that we can't describe, but in my opinion, it's something that we can use to both describe the world and predict the world. As you said, and I mean, we predicted the existence of Neptune because we noticed that something was wrong with Uranus's orbit. I'm not pronouncing it Uranus. So they saw that something was wrong with Uranus's They saw that something was wrong with Uranus's orbit, so they predicted that there had to be another planet. Using math, they predicted that there was another planet behind Uranus that was actually influencing Uranus's orbit. So they kind of used mathematics to predict what was coming next. They used physics and mathematics to predict our reality. And it actually worked. A few years or decades after we made that prediction, we discovered the 8th planet, Neptune. And shortly after, we discovered Pluto, but nobody cares about Pluto anymore.
Yeah, apparently it was degraded from a planet into something else. But yeah, so I think that's the case for me. If somebody were to introduce maths to me as a language, firstly to try and describe reality, but also just like what Soborno is saying, as you know, reality is complex and we don't know all of it, and we can use maths. Maths is the language or the instrument that we use to sort of untangle this complex bundle of reality. You know, that I don't know, that would have made things a lot easier for some of us, you know. You know, I wasn't necessarily bad at maths, but I didn't care about it, just like every other kid in school. But I cared a lot about software. And writing code is a bit like, you know, mathematics in a sense, because you want a program to write it, to work in a particular way, and you've got code as the language that you use to make computers behave in a certain way, you know. So yeah, I think perhaps we need to have another session where we try to, firstly, I think we've sort of got the why we are doing what we are doing. We need to now start scoping it so that there's some things we can actually deliver or work towards, and maybe some of it is around the narrative of what mathematics actually is. You know, And yeah, let's see. But yeah, it's
sorry, I think the start should be in terms of exactly that. What is mathematics?
yeah.
And I like your analogies, and then absolutely that aspect of linking it to reality and how it is used for prediction and, I mean, even to some extent to control. But for me as well, I think what would have helped me is if someone could have explained to me how it works in the real world. So what is the real application of mathematics in the real world? Because I think when our minds make those connections, then things become clearer.
Yeah, and you can venture even further out.
Yeah, and you can see the value of it. Otherwise, it just becomes something that you need to memorize. What are you going to do with it? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I wanted to say. I mean, you took the words right out of my mouth. So, I mean, the thing is, mathematics has a purpose, and I've seen a lot of people, especially in my own Algebra 1 class, which is extremely sad. I've seen a lot of my classmates asking, but why? What is the purpose of this? When will we ever need graphing in real life? But I mean, things like Algebra 1 are literally everywhere in real life, especially if you want to do things in mathematics or science. So, and people say, oh, mathematics and science, not important, even though they are the foundation of literally all of our reality. So that's why I think our children need to learn the purpose of mathematics. If they don't see the purpose, they don't see the value. They will keep asking, why do we need this? And they will start becoming hesitant to learning mathematics. And so it eventually just becomes a matter of forced memorization, which is no fun in mathematics. In fact, it goes against the principle of mathematics and science.
You know, one of my kids was, we bought a couple of books, and I said to him, okay, great, so build a bookshelf. And obviously he knows, he's old enough, he's 15, so he knows the basic arithmetic and measuring things. He knows all of that. But when he actually had to build a bookshelf and apply, get a ruler and make sure that this side is the same as the other side, suddenly his bookshelf was like this, and the angles were not right, and which is exactly what you're saying, Doc. And then it was like, oh my God, actually, there's, when he actually had to build a bookshelf, and he built his bookshelf and he put all these books and it collapsed. And so now we have another problem, which is, okay, so what went wrong? Now we're dealing with the weight of the books and the carrying capacity of the bookshelf and how. So, so I think that's another way of learning mathematics, where we don't start from the abstract theoretical side. We say just build something. And in the process of building, you actually start connecting your own dots and seeing the significance of certain things. Yeah, so that's one method of getting into maths and science.
Well, I also wanted to talk about that. So I've heard of these things called junk playgrounds. So basically, if you're thinking of a normal playground, you're probably thinking of like a big slide, a rooftop, like some swings and other stuff, and maybe a rock wall or two if you're feeling risky. However, in junk or adventure playgrounds, what's happening is that it's not actually a really safe playground. And what's happening is that there is wood, metal, tools, materials, nails everywhere, and kids, when they're in that sort of environment, feel like they're being taken more seriously. So I see an application of math in those sorts of playgrounds, and also it helps build a child's confidence in itself, and it also helps children not only see the purpose in math, but also if they want to become a builder or worker in their future, it helps them gain experience. So when you're 26 and you're applying for a worker's job that needs 20 years of experience, you'll say, I was in a junk playground when I was 6, and you'll hopefully be accepted. So that's what I wanted to say. And also, I see that whole bookshelf thing as an application of physics as well. You have to think, as you said, about the carrying capacity of the bookshelf, the mass of each book, how much force or weight it's exerting down on the shelf. And I'm hoping that your son's bookshelf isn't wonky anymore, but who knows?
Yeah, we're still playing with it. But also the other aspect of it is I would say there's an element of ethics and aesthetics as well. Because surely your bookshelf, you could just take your books and bury them under your bed or put them somewhere. But then there's this sense of caring for your own property. So actually building something and organizing an aspect of your life is really important, that he had to learn. And then the other part is just aesthetics. He had to choose the wood and suddenly know, maybe I want this and I want that, or it doesn't match with this. So it also develops that sense of how things accommodate one another in his bedroom. So hence I was saying when we began, there's these multiple dimensions of our human nature, I would say. And I think there are different methods of cultivating all of them. And one of them is just by making things. We learn a hell of a lot more in making things than just theorizing over them sometimes. But I think Sushi wants us to stop now.
Yeah,
not at all. I just want to make a contribution. It's very interesting, what you guys have spoken. And something that's come to my mind, I was thinking that Soborno can help us to put a video for the students that we could play at the schools. It's fun to learn maths. So something from, doing something different, we can do from the background, but I think now they went in the first semester. So it's, that kind of thing, just some motivation. I would just think something to share with them.
That's a great idea, Mrs. Sushi. Thanks.
I love that idea as well. I think that's an absolutely great idea. Obviously, while we were talking about the bookshelf as well, I was just thinking about something that I saw where they actually, where somebody went and they made a bookshelf in the shape of a tree. So the different branches were like shelves, and then it branched off to other shelves, and it looked so amazing. Like you say, that creativity as well. So it's such a beautiful thing. So many amazing things that you can bring into that and into the learning experience. I really love that.
Yeah.
Wait a second. If it was a tree that was branching out, wouldn't it just collapse on the side that had more branches? Or am I missing something here?
No, it was just basically shaped in the side in the shape of a tree. So they had, and then in some of them I was actually trying to look for it for you. It was just a really interesting. So some of them were actually like angled, and then the books were stacked at an angle. And
I've seen those.
Yeah, it's just fascinating.
You just need a very strong base, so that the branches shouldn't be too long, otherwise then it starts wobbling.
Yeah, and it's not loose. It's still it's shelves on a wall, but they are slightly angled, and then they've got other pieces of wood that then supports it.
It's sort of like this.
Yeah, so
that
like
pizza,
something like
that pizza tower or something in Italy.
Yeah, So, and then like you were saying, it has things like this that looks like that. So it doesn't really look like but when you look at it from a distance, it looks a bit like a tree. Almost like a tree of knowledge,
Yep. So, yeah, I think sure, you can say something, Prof.
No, and no, it's fine. But I would kind of love if it actually looked like a tree and there was a door you could open to actually access all of the books inside. I wonder how hard it must have been to actually get a book and borrow it.
Well, we could build that, at our school in Mr. Mlambo.
Yeah.
Why
Taking
not?
it to test.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah,
And
let's
we're working
build
with
a tree.
safety, so we can get some trees and see how that goes.
So definitely,
All right.
But I think what we need to do is maybe organize the next session, and I'm gonna definitely start jotting some ideas because I think I have a sense of where we're going. And when we come back to the next session, we can start playing, and maybe even get the kids to start playing with the idea as well. And who knows, they might also, because they're on the receiving end, isn't it, of this maths and science problem. So maybe they should also get involved in trying to find a solution.
I actually have something serious to say this time when I raise my hand. So, first of all, I'm assuming that the last 20 or so minutes of this conversation will be put into organizing a future session. And number two, will there be any sort of where will we be able to document what we're going to be doing over the next few days and when the next session will be? Will we be doing it on Google Docs or something like that?
Yeah, I think Sushi, you'll have to guide us on our workspace. I don't mind anything. Teams is fine. Google Docs is fine. Anything is fine for me.
Teams work well with us. Mr. Malambo, you as well?
Yeah, no, it's fine. Teams it's okay with me as well.
Do you think we should reconvene? We need to go back to the drawing board and I've recorded this session, and Sprinzel and I can also chat from Da Vinci's side. And I think Mr. Malambo and Vusi can also have a chat on that side. And we have Soborno as the mediator if we need to go back. And probably the next 2 weeks, is that too long? What do you guys think?
It's fine for me. 2 or 3 weeks is actually pretty short, it feels like.
Okay.
But I'm waiting to hear the opinions of Mr. Vusi and Dr. Franzel.
No, 2 weeks is fine. We also don't want to lose the momentum. I think 2 weeks is okay. If it feels a bit rushed, I'm sure we'll deal with it in the next session.
Sure.
We also, need to be guided by you, because it's also about your availability, your time, where you will be able to fit things in. But I think we've made a good start in terms of, I think where we need to start off with is what you were saying, and I liked Suchi's idea as well, is maybe a little bit of an inspirational video for the kids to say why maths is important, why we do it, how it fits into our world, and some of the analogies around a treasure chest. And I absolutely love the idea of making it practical, like the bookshelves and things like that, and so many other things that can be taught from that. So so I don't know, you need to guide us as well in terms of how much time you need, how much time you have available, and so that we can decide where we want to take this next.
I completely agree with Mrs. Sushi's idea. So I think that we can go ahead in maybe 2 weeks, and if it feels rushed, I'm sure we can deal with that in the next session, as Dr. Franzel said. And I'm wondering when the next session will be, but maybe we can communicate with each other after the session, and Miss Sushi will be able to tell us when the next session between us will be.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We'll do that. Definitely. And I think
Yeah.
we can go back to the, recording if need be to see what we spoke about, just to reconfirm. And I really, Mr. Malambo and Busi, that would be great for you guys to work together. It's about your schools and what can you see from your space. I think that'll be a great idea, yeah. And I mean, with Frenzel and I, and it's an email, to Soborno, so we can let's work as a team, but we'll come back together in 2 weeks' time. And
Awesome.
Soborno, is Sundays your best days?
Well, kind of. Maybe Saturdays are better, but I mean, Sundays are before Mondays, so maybe I want to be too available on Sundays because I need to go to sleep early. But on Saturdays, I'm available until like 3 a.m.
Oh my! 3 a.m. and what's our time by then? Okay, but I'll drop you an email. And I'll work with the team. And, I know in the next few weeks, it's the Easter comes through. So we'll just have to work around the diaries because people, the colleagues might be going away. But we'll chat. I think that'll be great.
Oh,
Soborno?
yeah. I also forgot to mention that for spring break, schools are closed between April 14 to April 22. So I will also be fully available then.
Okay, so that'll be during the weekdays.
Yeah. So April 14 to April 22, I will be available. Yes.
Okay, colleagues. So we can also look at that, and that 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock or whatever time, our time on a weekday. Are you guys prepared? Will you be available on a weekday?
Well, for school, when school is open, no. But for like spring break, as I said, April 14 to 22, yes. But for now, I don't think I will be available.
Okay, no problem. I'm chatting to the other colleagues, because it will be in this period. It will be from 5 o'clock our time. So I will discuss with them, and then we'll chat. I'll liaise with your dad. How's that?
Sure. I fully support that. So I would like to thank everybody for attending to such a session. And we got into like the philosophicalness of mathematics, mathematical development, how we can make students stress less. We got into a lot of things just for this beginning discussion. And we got into so many topics for just this, 2-hour talk. So I am so proud of all of us who have attended here, and I'm hoping we can have similarly great sessions next week and the week after that. So I would like to thank all of you for attending. And by the way, I also have some small Saturday classes starting April 9, but they're only from 9 to 11, so I don't believe they will be a problem.
Awesome.
Thank you for taking your time as well. We really appreciate it and really look forward to just coming together. It's going to be great.
Thank you.
It is very special to be able to spend time with you. So thank you so much for making your time available.
No problem. I would like to thank all of you for meeting up here as well. And I hope that we can do just as great on the next session. So I would like to thank everybody, and I would like to say, good luck on all of the days to come, because I know you have already gone through so many endeavors, especially since I left South Africa. And just seeing South Africa for 4 days has made me want to come back for a lifetime. So it's great and honorable how all of you are persevering here. So I would like to say thank you all for doing so much.
Awesome.
Thank
Thank you.
No, thanks, Doc. Thank you,